Christian nationalists are a threat to American democracy. You know, my friend Rachel Lazar likes to say that the end point of white Christian nationalism is nothing less than the toppling of democracy, and she's absolutely right. Christian nationalism is an existential threat to a government of the people, for the people, and by the people. And we saw that on January 6th. And it is that way by design. In fact, Christian nationalism works to privilege this very select, small, chosen group of people. And in their Christian nation, the law will protect these conservative white Christians, but not bind them. And it will bind everybody else who's not in that group, but not protect them. This is the authoritarian dream. It's at its most basic level, it's the theme of every dystopian novel that you've ever read, right? Privileging this small group of people at the expense of everybody else. And that is what we are fighting against. It is inherently unequal, it is inherently anti-democratic, and inherently un-American. Ron DeSantis is a Christian nationalist. He is testing the limits of our democracy and really seizing authoritarian power to the greatest extent he can. And what we are seeing with Ron DeSantis and Sarah Huckabee Sanders and Donald Trump and all of these Christian nationalists is they are raging against the dying of their privilege. They are looking around and they see that conservative, cis, white, heteronormative Christian men no longer have the power, the deference, the favoritism, the privilege that they had in the past. And I say that, I mean legal privilege, right? Like they were allowed to do whatever they wanted way back when. And they've lost that deference and that power and that privilege. And they are desperately seeking to get it back. And this is actually a pretty common sociological thing that happens in a society. When the dominant group or caste loses its power, it turns to authoritarians, to these so-called strong men, to violent insurrection like we saw on January 6th, to things like Christian nationalism, to regain that lost, or the perception of that lost power and privilege and status. And that's what's happening right now. That's why we are seeing this rising Christian nationalism, and that is what we are fighting against. They are raging against the dying of their privilege.
At the Supreme Court today, an historic upheaval. In a sweeping ruling that overturned a half a century of precedents, 5 justices ended the right of American women to choose abortion under the Constitution.
Christian nationalists and the larger conservative legal movement orchestrated a hostile takeover of the Supreme Court. They spent hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, literally, we know this. We know that Leonard Leo of the Federalist Society spent $540 million packing the Supreme Court from 2014 to 2020. That's blocking Merrick Garland from ever getting a hearing, through putting Neil Gorsuch on the court, through putting Brett Kavanaugh on the court, and then through shotgunning Amy Coney Barrett onto the court at the very end, in an election in which 50 million people had already voted. Right? They spent $540 million that we know of packing the court. The Supreme Court has been packed already. All the discussion that we hear, here's ways we can fix the court, the Democrats are trying to pack, that all has already happened. It was done. And in fact, Mitch McConnell changed the size of the Supreme Court when it suited him, right? He dropped it down to 8 justices for more than 400 days, for more than a year when it suited his political ends. Then he bumped it back up to 9 when he could get his people on the court. So our Supreme Court has been taken over by the conservative legal movement, and they installed crusaders, Christian nationalists on this court. And these justices, these 6 deeply, deeply conservative justices, want to decide cases that rip apart the wall of separation between church and state, that tear down and redefine religious freedom and weaponize religious freedom, giving conservative Christians in this country a tool, literally a weapon, to impose their religion on everybody else. We've already seen what they did with reproductive rights and justice, and they're going to keep coming for every one of these rights that we hold most dear, right? The end of Roe versus Wade is just the beginning. They're coming for contraception. They're coming for marriage equality. They're coming for every one of the rights that we hold most dear. And they're going to do everything they can to legally privilege conservative white Christian men until we stop them. And it really is up to us to stop them. And so the question, what do we do, comes down to how do we check the out-of-control Supreme Court? And everybody learned in school that our constitutional order, it's a system of checks and balances. And when that third branch of government, we got the president, Congress, and the Supreme Court, when the third branch of government gets out of control, it's up to the other two branches to check it. And the Supreme Court needs to be checked because right now they are drunk on their power. And they are running around unchecked, ripping apart our rights, tearing down the wall of separation, and they have to be stopped. And I think the best way to do that, the clearest way to do that, is to expand the size of the Supreme Court. And do it because it has been taken over, because it has been packed with conservative Christian nationalists. I mean, honestly, after white Christian nationalism, the biggest threat to American democracy is the US Supreme Court. Everybody can do something to fight back against this creeping authoritarianism, to fight Christian nationalism. And again, I do believe we can relegate it back to the fringe whence it came. The key is to start small and start local, to do what you can. You don't have to fix the Supreme Court. That's not up to you. You have to go to your local school board meeting and speak out against the book banners and burners. You have to go to your local city council meeting and speak out against them imposing Christian prayer on everybody. You have to run for local office as an open non-believer and somebody who cares about the separation of church and state. You have to join your local groups, join your national groups. You have to read up on these issues and arm yourselves with that knowledge. And most of all, never let Christian nationalism go unchallenged. And again, you don't have to take it to the Supreme Court. Do it in your own backyard. I mean, that is absolutely the key for us to win this fight. The other side is so well organized and they played a very long game. And that is, I think, probably the biggest thing that our side needs to realize is there is no silver bullet for us to fix this overnight. Right? We have to temper our expectations. The other side fought for 20, 30, 40 years to get Roe versus Wade overturned. They played a very long game and they are reaping the rewards of that long game now. We have to do the same thing. And that means setting your expectations at a reasonable level. We're not going to win anything back overnight. We have a very long haul ahead of us, but in the end, we are going to win.